What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Simple Songwriting. I'm your host, Cameron, and we are talking about one of my favorite songs, actually, like a really a classic in my history. I've loved this song for a long time. We're talking about "The Wicked End" by Avenged Sevenfold off of their third album, City of Evil. You know, I was I've done Sleep Token for the past 2 episodes, and my big gripe about those, the 2 songs, Damocles and Emergence, is, how Sleep Token kind of lets they drop the ball when it comes to maintaining artistic integrity and immersion. And, I've been kind of on this City of Evil kick lately. I grew up listening to this album, I love it, and I think that they absolutely nail immersion in a lot of the songs, and this song in particular, they nail it. Everything is it is one of their most immersive songs. It's huge and epic. It's a giant story about the apocalypse. It really is a you know, it just brings you in the whole time, and it's just everything that I would want to see from, like, a storytelling song, and done great. So there's a lot to talk about here. It's a long song. It's like 7 minutes, so I hope this episode isn't, 7 hours, but we're gonna see. But yeah, it is a mammoth of a song, and truthfully, it nails almost everything that it does. There's a few small spots where I'm like, that could have been better, but the truth is that this song really is a top tier, like 10 out of 10 song. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk about it. So maybe a little bit of background, City of Evil came out in 2005. It was Avenged Sevenfold's first album where they decided to not have screaming. It was a kind of a artistic choice that they wanted to take, because they wanted to focus in on like writing great vocal melodies and cutting loose from the screaming, because the screaming is actually, I've always liked that they did that, because I do think that screaming is a little bit of a cop out. You can just write all these really awesome musical parts, and then what? You just scream over them, and you don't have to worry about a vocal melody and how to make those interesting in the verses and things. So I've always liked that they did this. I've personally prefer bands that 100% sing, with maybe 95% sing, but then use the screaming as a tool whenever it would be appropriate, right? A lot of bands will write like these big emotional songs about their sadness and their feelings and then scream it all. And it's like, it's not quite as impactful, as it would be if you did the melodies and then use the screaming a little more sparingly. So I've always liked it. But then another big aspect of this album was that they really wanted to go balls to the wall, all out on everything. So it's like this album really is a test of not a test, it's a good show of maximalism, to its fullest. There's guitar harmonies all over the album. The drums are constantly going nuts, vocal harmonies, and there's tons of vocal parts. I mean, some sections have 8 or 9 vocal sections going at once on top of guitar harmonies, on top of bass and orchestral elements like strings and piano and everything. This album is nuts. So if you've never listened to it, please go check it out. It's a amazing album. It's just insane. And this song, it's a little bit of a deep cut from it. I don't remember exactly which number it is on the track list. Hold on, I think I've got it right here. It is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It is track 8, on an 11 out of 11 songs. I think it's 11. Again, didn't expect to have to pull this up, but I do want to get this right. Because yeah, 11 songs. And so the thing is right, when you're listening to an album like this and it's just nuts. I mean, the first song is Beast and the Harlot, and that song is also nuts. Every single song is nuts. It's like the funny thing about this album is that the deeper you get into it, they actually start having songs with a little bit more space. The first like 4 or 5 songs are just balls to the wall, speed metal, shred, heavy craziness, right? And then you get to Seize the Day, but then you start to get songs like Sidewinder and Strength of the World, and this song, which are a little more open and allow for some more diversity and breathing room after the insanity of the first few songs. So with that said, this song is insane in its own way. But yeah, so it's a storytelling song. This song is essentially about the end of the world, the apocalypse. There's no like specific character or narrator. It's more of a the vocals are a they're telling the tale rather than like from an overarching sense rather than being from the point of view of one character. So it's cool. The big topic here that I really want to get into is uh immersion and artistic integrity, because those have been the topics. That was specifically the topic on the Damocles episode, which I felt like, you know, Sleep Token really messed that up. They ruined their own immersion. They broke artistic integrity, really went out of their way to do it, in my opinion. And I think that there are people who might think, well, yeah, but I like that, or I want that, or they have to do that in order to achieve some type of goal. I completely reject that premise. I think that you can have a meaning and a message in your song while still maintaining the integrity of it. And even on a song like this, which is 7 minutes long, it's balls to the wall craziness with all these different movements and sections. You can still have that artistic integrity and immerse your audience without having to resort to gimmicks or cheap tricks or lyrical I don't know what you would call it, lyrical gimmicks is the word. It's a gimmick, right? So if you're not sure what I'm talking about when it comes to Damocles, go listen to that episode. I think I'm actually pretty proud of that episode. I think I did a good job analyzing that song. But yeah, like when they talk about touring and write songwriting within the song, you really remove your audience from that immersion. So cool. But yeah, we'll get more into that. This is going to be a pretty long one, so we should get started. Let's just start. Let's play the first section. Hold on. Looks like Spotify has disconnected. Let me get that back again. Okay. Here we go. Cool. So that's the first section. So this song, though it is long and it has lots and lots of parts, this song moves at a very fast pace. So I think sometimes these sections you can speed past them and not really analyze what's going on, but there's a lot of time and care and attention that was put to everything in this song. So let's just break down this beginning. It's chaos essentially. It is just absolute chaos. The drums are playing a very consistent double they're playing consistent double kick 16th notes. So that's that that you hear. They're doing a tom he's also playing toms with it. So the toms are actually going dun 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 dun, which is really cool when played over the kick. So listen for those toms there. Dun 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 dun. Right, you hear that? So, but with the kick underneath. So it's pretty cool. It's kind of again, this part is supposed to be like a controlled chaos, like starting it off with craziness. We've got the bass. Well, the guitars are playing. They're essentially just doing noise, right? Like they're just rubbing it sounds like different pick scrapes. So when you scrape the pick over the strings on a distorted guitar, that's how you get that really twisted swirling sound that like, yeah, like it just sounds like noise. So that's what they're doing. It sounds like they've layered that. I don't know how many takes they've got there specifically. Let's hear. Yeah, they probably have like 3 or 4 takes going of just guitar noise, and then sounds like they're panning them a little bit too, just to again create like a crazy chaotic atmosphere. But then what's sort of holding this whole section down is the bass guitar, which is playing the main riff, or one of the main riffs, right? So it's that. So it's a pretty fast riff for a bass to play, but that makes it sound cool, right? And because it's the bass, I mean, I don't want to look. I love bass guitar, but it's not like the leading instrument, right? So it might not be the first thing that your ear gravitates to when you hear this section, but it is what's holding this section together musically, right? Obviously the drums are doing their thing too, but the bass is the like main part, and your ear will catch that to some extent, even if it's not conscious. Like if you're not like a super music pro, you will still on some level catch that that's what the bass is doing, especially when we enter the next section, which is where the guitars come in and play the same part. So yeah, listen for the bass here playing it. So now everything is, so I don't know off the top of my head, and I'm not going to take the time to do it right now, if those guitar toms line up with the bass, because the bass is playing a consistent 16th note riff as well. So really, it's playing along with the double kick, but I don't know if the tom hits are emphasizing certain notes. Let me listen. No, so they're not. So that's one of the cool things about what the toms are doing, is that they're actually like playing this whole separate thing that's not even relevant to the to the riff, which again adds to the chaos of the section, right? Um so cool. But yeah, let's get to the end of this section so we can get into the first like composed section. So we got a little snare fill to bring us into the guitars, and now here we go. So again, super fast. Like we are just, that little chaos section is 8 seconds, and then we are just moving. So first and most prominently, the guitars are playing the same thing as the bass line from before. They're just playing it obviously like a higher octave in a more lead guitar range, and it's a harmony too. So they're doing this harmonized version. Now the harmonies that they're playing are actually really interesting. Because they're sort of combining and they do this throughout the whole song. Again, this is something I really appreciate about Avenged Sevenfold, is that they'll decide on a song like which sort of off notes they're going to play throughout that song. So in this specifically, like this song is in D minor, but they're playing the tritone and then they're playing in harmonic minor. So that would mean a sharp seventh. I know theory people might not understand that, but essentially they're picking these really interesting notes to use as harmonies, and then they're going to continue to use those notes throughout the song on a lot of the guitar parts, and the solo as well. So like it's not just, oh, just for this one part they're going to use these off notes. It's like they've chosen, okay, these are going to be these sort of quote unquote off notes or weird notes that they play throughout it. So they're doing standard D minor the D minor scale, but then they're also including the sharp seventh for harmonic minor, and then the tritone, which, I mean, that could be anything. You could say that's pentatonic blues or whatever. They don't really use it as like a pentatonic blues thing in this. It's the tritone is specifically a very dark, evil sounding note, but it's a little more like, I would say it's a little bit more in your face, as opposed to the harmonic minor, the sharp seventh. Which is a little more sly, a little more tension building. So yeah, including those two notes in there gives this both, right? It makes it sound sly and evil, but it's also kind of in your face, and that's why this whole part works really well. So yeah, listen to that here, and just maybe with that understanding, even if you don't understand anything I just said because you don't know theory, you can hear how this guitar part sounds really off-putting and unsettling, but like not in a bad way. It sounds very evil, and so check it out. Yeah, it's really cool. It's got a really unique sound to it. So yeah, then on top of that, there is something interesting happening with the rhythm underneath the guitars, right? The lead guitars, is that the rhythm that's being played, which is dun 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 dun, that is only being played by the guitars and the drum, or guitars and the bass. The drums actually keep doing the consistent 16th notes. So listen to the kick, it's going but now we've just added the cymbal and the snare, which is playing kind of like it's not really blast beats, it's like a thrash beat, like boom bop boom bop boom bop. over the 16th notes. So check out the drums here real quick. So in terms of the actual rhythm that's being played in the background, it's still that it's dun 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 dun. But usually where like the the rhythm guitars and the bass would be following the drums and the drums would lead the rhythm, they're actually doing their own thing. The drums are just kind of doing a bass line, pretty straightforward metal drum part with no specific rhythm, just like consistent notes, consistent cymbal, snare, and kick, while the bass and the rhythm guitars are playing that rhythm. So listen to the rhythm guitar real quick. The dun 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 dun. So it's just the guitars that are doing that, which there's a reason. I'm pointing a lot of this out because there's a reason why they're doing it like that, which is going to show up in the next section. So yeah, real quick, before we move on to the next section, I want to point out, like, okay, so we've now evolved the chaos, right? So the chaos went from having that bass riff playing the part the kick drum doing 16th notes. This is a natural evolution of that. The drums are still doing the 16th notes, so we still have that consistent chaos happening. The guitars are still playing that same riff, so it doesn't sound like a whole new part. The bass was already playing this before, but now it's gone from sounding like complete chaos to maybe a little bit more controlled and having more composition to it. And so now we're actually starting to sound like a song, right? Like this is actually a song rather than just noise at the like we had at the beginning. This is really cool because there are two big elements to this song, right? Which is the apocalyptic end of the world thrashy side of this song, but then also the orchestrated, very composed, very purposeful side. And these two things show up throughout the song. So we're starting off with the crazy insanity apocalyptic stuff, and then when this the next section comes in, you're going to see how they continue to evolve it, moving it forward. So everything is still feeding off of what came before, but it's going to sound maybe a little more composed and a little bit more mature. So let's go into the next section real quick. Okay, so really cool thing here. The rhythm has stayed the same. The underlying rhythm has not changed, but now the drums are actually following the rhythm guitar with the kick. So the drums are now going like the dun 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 dun. Now the snare is actually staying in the same spot as well, so as it was before, but the cymbal has changed to kind of a closed hi-hat type of thing, which gives a little bit more space, more air and breathing room than the whatever cymbal was being hit before, which was like kind of a consistent ride or crash. I don't know which exactly, but what this does is, I think the point that I'm trying to get across with this is that we are layering upwards. Like we aren't just going to a completely new section with each section. We're starting with, okay, we're doing double kick with this bass riff. Now the guitars are playing what the bass played. The drums are still kind of doing the same, but they're making a small change, like adding the snare. And then the guitars or the bass is going to be playing this rhythm. But now on the third section, the drums are actually going to follow that rhythm that the bass was playing before. The guitars are playing something completely new, but the snare is going to stay the same. So each section, there are things that stay the same compared to the prior section, but there's also things that slightly change. And so it sounds like we're moving and evolving. It doesn't sound like anything is like there's nothing that's completely different or out of left field happening here. So it's a natural evolution from section to section, which is great. I mean, that's what I mean by it. All of the elements are so purposeful. So here, pay attention again to like the rhythm guitars and then how the drums come in and match the rhythm. And now hear how the snare as well is doing the same thing as it was before. So like follow that snare and you'll see how it doesn't change. So again, everything is naturally evolving. Now, I mentioned earlier that there was a little bit more space because he switched to the hi-hat. Listen to that real quick because you can hear how he's hitting that. Again, I think it's a ride, just going, but he switches to a hi-hat, which is more like in the background. So listen to that. Crash, and then that little sparkle, the hi-hat. It gives this section a little bit more breathing room because it is supposed to sound a bit more open and less chaotic than before. So we're going from like total chaos and slowly transitioning into like organization and a little bit more composed element. Which brings us to the biggest change on this third section, which is the guitars, which actually have a melody now. So rather than playing continuous 16th notes, that we've actually got a full-on melody, which is like da 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 down da 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 da. Now, I want to point out these guitar harmonies are still doing this, like almost note for note, the same. Let me explain. There's two guitar parts playing here that are harmonized together. So they're playing different notes, but each individual note between the two guitars, like the notes between the guitars, how can I phrase this? They're keeping the same harmonies that they were playing on the prior section. So I mentioned how there was like the tritones and the sharp sevenths and all of that from harmonic minor. They're keeping those same harmonies in place here. They've just changed it from like continuous 16th notes to a different melody, right? So they're keeping that same like evil, dark, twisted sound because they're keeping the same harmonies from before, but it's just transposed to a different composition, a melody. So that's why it sounds like it makes perfect sense coming from one guitar part to the next. So like listen to how smooth this transition on the lead guitars is. Okay, hey guys, sorry, my audio cut out for Spotify, so I was bringing up sections and it wasn't working. So anyway, the last thing I was talking about was how smooth the transition between the guitars was because they're using the same harmonies between guitar riff A and guitar riff B, or dual guitar part A and dual guitar part B in the intro. So here's the guitar riff in A. And then we transition into B, and they're using the same harmonies like between the two guitars, but they just change it into a different type of melody. So yeah, that's why those two parts flow really well into each other because they're using the same harmonies. Now I don't remember 100% everything that I was saying and how much got cut off. But the big point that I wanted to make is that we've already established a lot in these first three sections. Like we've established a ton, and we don't even know what the song's about yet. And that's really, honestly, it's really powerful because we haven't even gotten to the point of like, we're just getting started. Like we're getting warmed up, and in each of these guitar parts is going to show up later in the song as well. But there's just a lot happening here where we know, okay, there's obviously like a chaotic element to this song. There's a thrashy driving element, and then there's also like, so it's going to be intense, but then there is this evil orchestrated side to it too, which we can tell from the second dual guitar riff. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff. But yeah, we come down into the verse though right after this, and now we came out of guitar riff A, or the first two sections, right? Like the bass intro and then guitar riff A, they had the drums playing consistent 16th notes. When you get into guitar riff B, harmony riff B, you have the drums kind of following along with the rhythm of the guitar and bass, rhythm guitars and bass. So it's a little bit more of a standard rhythm. It's not just like constant notes. It's a little bit of a breather just to get that dual guitar riff in there and that orchestrated element. But we jump right back into like crazy 16th note, not quite blast beats, but like crazy drums, like right off the bat. So here we go. So one thing I want to note about this, usually when drums do a beat like this, they do what are called blast beats, which essentially are when you put the snare on the first, on like the downbeat, and then you put the kick on the upbeat. So it sounds like pop, like the snare is the pop, and then the kick is like the doom, and so you have like pop, doom, pop, doom, pop, doom, and you could do those very, very fast when you're like an accomplished drummer. So you can go like batu 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 batu, and it gets this crazy sound. But the Rev here, the drummer, he actually flipped that a little bit, and he's doing like a crazy fast thrash beat, which is the opposite, where the kick is on the downbeat, the snare is on the upbeat. So it's like do ba do ba. So do ba do ba do ba do ba do ba. It sounds similar. It does have a similar sound, but it's just a different type of intensity, which is really cool. It's just something that he decided to do, and I think it works well. It's very driving. So check that out, and pay attention to how the snare is not quite on the downbeat if you've got the ear for it. Man's becoming more corrupt now, godless, wicked, and cruel. Now soulless mission silence, Mary's words waste. Yeah, so crazy technical drum beat. The Rev was insane. But yeah, it's very cool. So that's pretty much what the drums are doing throughout this whole section. Now the guitars are actually playing a pretty standard metal riff. It's just straight 16th notes, but then with these little higher notes kind of thrown in. So it's like nothing too crazy there, but there is these little harmonies that the rhythm guitars do with each other at the end of each repetition. So here, take a listen to that. You should be able to hear it here. Right here. That, no. It's actually like da 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 da, but they just play it really fast. Yeah, take one more listen to that. Oh, I skipped it. Sorry. Here. Right here. It's a small thing, but again, like this whole album and the song in this album are all about maximalism and just throwing in as much as they can. And if they can get that little guitar harmony there just to give just to add more, they did it. Before we get into the second half of the verse, let's talk about the vocals. So this is kind of what I mean, where like these vocals are definitely not screamed vocals. They're not like, rah, rah, like that type of scream. It's more of like heavy melodic vocals. So he's lyrically, let's go through the lyrics. He's saying man's becoming more corrupt now, godless, wicked, and cruel. The soulless man stood silenced. Mary's words rang so true. So I'm not going to get too deep into like all of the exact biblical references here and like what it all means. I think they're meant to be kind of interpreted, like open to interpretation, but the gist of it is here, especially with that first line, which is mankind has become more corrupt. We're godless, wicked, and cruel. So he's setting up like, okay, what's happening? Where is this? What's the setting? And so, I mean, even with that, he's not, I think I mentioned at the beginning that this song is not from the point of view of any one person. The narrator is more of like this, I don't know how you would call it, like a overarching narrator. It's this kind of view from above type of thing, describing the events. And so, yeah, we're setting up that, okay, mankind's evil. And then we talk about the soulless man stood silenced. Mary's words rang so true. I think these lyrics will make more sense when we get into the second half. But yeah, I think vocally, I know M Shadow's voice in this album gets a lot of, it gets some criticism, but I actually have always loved it. I think it sounds so cool. No one else can really do stuff like this, and it just works really well for the type of like bite that these songs require. I wouldn't want to hear like screamed vocals over this. I think it would sound ridiculous. So yeah, let's hear that again. So yeah, I mean, lyrically, we're setting up the song. The premise is that they've become corrupt. Let's get into the second half now. Little dark harmony there, and then we get a little extra measure here to build up into the pre-chorus. Okay, so let's stop there. So a couple things happen in the second half of the verse. Let's just go through the lyrics real quick because we were already talking about them. He says, chastisement worse than the flood, spread the word, it's all true, or it's all through. don't kill the messenger, cause as if we haven't swam enough in this life of misery. And it kind of ends on misery, which goes into the pre-chorus, right? So essentially, the premise that this verse sets up very quickly, I might add, is that man has become extraordinarily corrupt. Um, they talk about how that soulless man stands silenced, uh, because he's now realizing that they are going to receive chastisement, which is punishment, worse than the flood. Spread the word, it's all through. So it's, a second flood is coming, but it's actually going to be worse. There's an apocalyptic event coming. The final line is, don't kill the messenger, because if we, don't kill the messenger, because as if we haven't swam enough in this life of misery. So he's saying, whoever the narrator at this point in the song is, because it does change kind of throughout the song. He's saying, don't kill me, I'm just the messenger. I do think that we've swam enough, meaning like with the flood, we've been punished enough in this life, but we are about to receive even more punishment, right? So there's a little bit of a different like point of view shifts happening. Then there's no consistent narrator, but yeah, there is a punishment coming for mankind because of their sinfulness. Now, let's talk about the music here real quick, because a few things happen musically. The first being is that there's more dual guitars that come in order to build up to the pre-chorus. So listen to those come in. They're playing, and the melody that they're playing is like a da-na-now, na-na-now, na-na-now. Again, like very orchestral, because that is the type of thing that strings or violins would play in order to build tension, but they're doing it with electric guitars. Right here. You can really hear it there. And then at the end here, they do a bend like, check that out. So those background lead guitars actually get louder and louder as the verse goes on, and they keep building up in terms of frequency, so they just become more prominent to your ear regardless. It's a cool way of like building this up. Like, okay, there's something coming. We're moving forward. Like, there's no slowing down on this. Let's see, what's my next note on this? I think that was it. Yeah. So the background guitars come in, the drums play the same part, the lyrics are setting up the conflict. Okay, I want to pause here now that we've had the very first verse, and a big part of this episode is juxtaposing it against the sleep token episode that I did on Damocles, which was all about breaking immersion. I want to clarify, or I want to just make the note and point it out, that we've established a setting, right? Like, we're talking about the flood, we're talking about man becoming godless, wicked, and cruel. There's almost this prophetic, like, it almost sounds like someone giving a sermon, the way that these lyrics are presented, but I don't think that that's meant to be like a specific narrator that we have. I think it's more of a overarching, like, from up above narrator. Not necessarily God, but you get what I mean. So the point is like, we've have a setting now where it's this kind of biblical apocalypse. At this stage, it's still an impending apocalypse, but there's a lot of biblical imagery. We never leave that. I want to note, like, because this is my big complaint, we never use modernisms. We never use, like, he's not going to talk about modern technology or use like, hey, hit me up, man. Like, he's not going to say things like that. This is a biblically inspired song. um that's not to say that like Avenged Sevenfold will never do stuff like that. They've done that plenty of times, but in this song in particular, they're keeping with the setting that they've established, and they're not going to resort to any gimmicks that break immersion. So as we go through the lyrics, I'm going to actually keep pointing that out, because I don't think it's that hard to do, to keep it in the setting. um and it actually makes the song better. It actually keeps you invested in the song. So like, at this point, you know at this point, we have already established so many things, and we're in it. Like, there's this crazy chaotic element, it's thrashy. There's so much to talk about already, and we're only, what, like 40 seconds in. um, there's no need to resort to gimmicks whenever you're just doing things well, right? So yeah, there is a tiny little transition into the pre-chorus that lasts like a measure. So here, let's play that right here. So the rhythm guitars go. Check that out. Right here. All right, so awesome. So after 40 something seconds, about 42 seconds, we finally get what I would consider to be like our first like groove. Like we could settle into a nice groove. Like all the tension, like the tension building at the end of that verse is peak. They even added that extra measure just to really like emphasize the tension there. Just so y'all know, that is what that the goal of something like that is, like adding one extra measure before slamming down into something. It's like when you're building tension with rising guitars, increased vocals, like vocal intensity, the drums are going nuts, everything's going crazy. Right when you think you're gonna like break out of that and like release that tension, to add just one more measure, just like four more beats of like more tension building, and then to do it, it's very satisfying for the listener because it's like, holy shit, we're still going. And then like, okay, we can finally break out of that. Another really good example of this that I've talked about before is actually the song Heavy is the Crown by Linkin Park, where Emily does that crazy long scream. And just when you think that the scream is going to end, they add one more measure onto the scream. And it just makes you subconsciously go like, because your brain, our minds are wired towards 4/4 timing. So we know like, okay, it's been four beats or four measures. So we know like now is when we're supposed to change sections. So to play on that is very impactful. So subconsciously, when that, we've had eight measures, right? And so we know, okay, we've hit a multiple of four. So we know it's about to change. But then to add a ninth measure onto that, just to have it, our brain subconsciously goes, holy shit, she's still screaming, or holy shit, they're still going. Like it's like, why are they still going with it, and that's just a cool thing, like that you can, once you're aware of that as a musician, you can throw that into a song and really build on that, like emphasize the tension as much as you can, which makes the release of the tension all the more satisfying, which in a lot of ways is what this pre-chorus is. um so yeah, really cool. um so let's play that again and kind of keep all of that I was just saying in mind, as we're just, again, the goal is build as much tension as possible, so that way when we come down into the groove, it just feels like a breath of fresh air. Um, so yeah, this now interestingly, this next section, I'm calling it the pre-chorus just to keep things organized, but I think it would actually be a little bit inaccurate to call it a pre-chorus, because the underlying drums and rhythm guitars and bass, they're actually playing the exact same thing that they play during the chorus. So if anything, it's like a pre-chorus is usually a whole different section. This is really more of like the first section of the chorus. It's just, instead of having vocals, it has guitar harmonies. Uh, Structurally, this is really interesting to me. You don't hear this a lot, where like, okay, we establish the music of the chorus first and then have the vocals come in for the chorus. It's kind of cool. But yeah, so instead of starting, so I'll call it the pre-chorus, but really think of it as like, okay, we've entered the chorus section. So we start this off with, instead of having vocals, we've got these guitar harmonies, which are playing a really sick melody. So check this out. So really cool melody, like so that melody specifically, very, it's it's not quite as like twisted or evil as the first melody or as the first few harmonic melodies, but it has this kind of, I don't want to use the words like sinister and wicked too much because the puns, but that's really how you can describe them. It's a very sinister sounding melody. It's really pleasing to the ear. I think it's actually a really singable, um, I, how would I say? It's like it's very singable. It's very catchy. It just really sounds good. I think one of the most interesting things theoretically about the melody is that they actually seem to. So there's two guitar parts, right, playing harmonies with each other. They actually seem to switch off which part is the melody and which part is the harmony. So for example, like if you listen to the guitar in the left speaker first, for like the first three notes, the guitar in the left speaker is harmonizing, is the harmony, and then the guitar in the right speaker is the melody. But then after the first three notes, they switch, and the guitar in your right speaker becomes the harmony, and the guitar in your left becomes the melody. Um, for people who don't understand what I'm saying, when you have music, right? Like when you have a melody and you want to write a harmony to it, you usually will start with your melody and then layer the harmony on top of it. So like when you listen to something like Pentatonics, right? Like that vocal only band, they do stuff like this all the time where they say like da 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 da, and then one person will sing that over and over again, and someone else will layer on top of that singing like da 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 na 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 na. But then they layer and layer until all five of them are singing different parts, but it's all working together, and that's what harmonies are. But in order to harmonize, you have to have something that you're harmonizing to, which is the original melody. Now, what they do here is that, so typically the harmony is going to be higher than the melody, but what they do here is they kind of switch those roles a little bit back and forth. So there isn't one guitar part that is doing everything, that is just doing the melody, or one that is just doing the harmony. They each kind of do a little bit of both. So it gives it like, what it really means to me is that they kind of need each other, the two guitar parts, in order to sound like a complete composition, which is a really interesting way to write your guitar parts. So they might have like written one guitar part first, then written the harmony, and then just switched them out, like switched different sections out with each other in order to get this mix and matched sound, which is really cool. It's very was very orchestral. It's very composed and intelligent. And so, I mentioned earlier that those are kind of the two elements of this song, is the crazy, insane thrash, which we just heard for sure in the verse. Uh, and we got a little taste of the orchestral, but really the whole song up to this point has been that crazy, intense thrash. But now we get to hear maybe a little bit more of the that other side, that like dark intellectual side, that dark rational side, and we'll hear it with the lyrics too. So yeah, I really like these guitar parts. Let's hear them again. Yeah, really nice, really nice. So now as far as what everything else is doing, the drums have settled into a pretty standard groove. It's not like full on four on the floor, but it is just like do ba, right? So just leaving a lot of space, giving a little bit of breathing room after all the craziness for the past like 40 seconds. Um, so that's nice. The guitars are playing a pretty standard rhythm section. It's just like down, down, dun, dun, down, 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 dun, dun, down, 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 dun, dun, down, down. The progression is relatively normal. It starts on the root note and then just works its way down the scale. So it goes the root note, it skips the seventh, but it goes to the 6, 5, 4, 3, and then finally like a 2/7 combination. That won't make sense to you if you don't know music theory. It probably won't it might not make sense to you if you know music theory, because I'm not like some master of it. But hey, yeah, that's what it does. It's just moving downward, so then it naturally repeats really well. So here, I'll kind of point that out. I'll sing along with it. Dun, 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 8, 6, 6, dun, dun. Dun, 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 dun. dun, 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 dun. So it just keeps working its way down further until it gets to the point where it would repeat at the octave, and then it just goes right back up and starts again. This actually makes this chorus really, it makes it very easy to repeat this over and over again, and it stays interesting, because it's just a kind of a constant loop rather than being like a four chord progression or something. It technically kind of is a four chord. No, it's not. No, it's not. Never mind. But instead of it being like a regular four chord progression where the different chords are kind of scattered throughout, like you go from like the 1 to the 4 to the 5 to the 3 or something like that. This is pretty standard, like, or this kind of does this descending thing, which is really cool. Let's see, is there anything else I wanted to talk about here? Oh, the vocals are doing a little background thing here, which I'll just point it out now so that way I don't have to point it out again. Still will. The vocals change what they change what they do over each pre-chorus. So even though the music on each pre-chorus is the same, there's always just a little bit of a difference because of what the vocals do. And what the vocals do typically emphasize, they build in intensity so that by the time you get to the last one, he's doing like full-on screams over it. Hear that fade in? Little whine, yeah, that little snaky whine thing that M Shadows does all throughout this album. Yeah, so it's cool. So this pre-chorus does a lot of things. Thematically, it opens the song up a little bit and allows for the orchestral elements to come in, so like in terms of the musical themes. Lyrically, it gives us a little bit of a platform to actually, rather than like just shouting crazy stuff, not shit stuff at the at the listener, it gives us a chance for some more mature poetic lyrics, which we're about to get. And so yeah, it's very cool, and it just works well because we've had all this crazy thrashiness before, and now we get a different flavor. So that's pretty much everything on this. So let's get into the chorus. I'm just gonna play like the first little bit of the chorus. Hold on, I'm gonna back it up just a tiny bit. Okay, so a few things. Instrumentally, at least on the rhythmically, right? Drums, rhythm guitars, and bass, everything stays the same. The guitar harmonies just cut out and vocals come in, and that's kind of what I meant. Where like this transition is so smooth because everything is staying the same that it almost seems a little bit misleading to call the section before it the pre-chorus, but I'm just saying it so it makes sense. The vocals here are pretty interesting. So it's double tracked, so he's singing the same thing on 2 takes, which gives it this like ethereal sound instead of having like one take, one track, which makes it sound like there is one person speaking. Again, there isn't one specific narrator or character on this song. He's almost kind of speaking for the whole of humanity to some extent. Or you could see it as like an otherworldly voice, which he's using to portray the large scale concepts and ideas that are being presented in the song. Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool way of doing that. Another thing that he does is that he doesn't each line actually layers over the line before it, so it literally sounds like there are multiple people singing. It's never just one voice. So here you can hear that here. Oh my god, I'm all over the place. Here, let's come back over here. And then here comes the next line. Every time as he's ending the last line, the next line is coming in over top of it. So it's more of like this stream of ideas and thoughts that are coming at you rather than like one person, because you could totally tell a story like this from the point of view of one person, right? And like that one individual is bemoaning the end of humanity, right? But that's not how they decided to do it. um, which is fine. I think this works really well with how grand and huge this song is. Lyrically, he's describing the state of humanity in its final hour. Uh, let's finish out the chorus so we can get all the lyrics. So yeah, that gets into the pre-chorus. But so the lyrics here, because it is a little hard to understand them, it's voice your prophecy, shed us some light, feel sorrow for mankind's chance to survive, swallowed lies and swam in our own tears, a stab in the dark, but it wounded our will. So again, this is more of like a high concept, like we're describing many things at once. It's meant to be an overall explanation of the state of humanity. So they're essentially, humanity is begging for mercy. You know, voice your prophecy, shed us some light. Uh, you know, help us, please give us something to look forward to. Instead, you know, you feel sorrow for this otherworldly voice could be telling you feel sorrow for mankind's chance to survive because they're not going to survive, right? Swallowed lies, swam in our own tears. Like this, what I find funny about this first half of the verse is that it's very pitiable, right? This could be seen as like mankind's view of themselves in this situation, which is like, you know, oh, we're the victims, or we are, help us, like the lyrics seem very reflective and sorrowful. They're in pain, and they're fearing the end, right? What's interesting is that, you know, I'll just spoil it. We get a second half of the verse or of the chorus later, which maybe what's the word I'm looking for? Shed some new light, for lack of a, you know, not to use the line itself from the song, but sheds a little bit of light on the state of humanity, and maybe portrays that they're not just these innocent victims of the apocalypse, right? We'll talk about that when we get there, but yeah, this song generally is about the sorrowful state of humanity and how we're going to be punished for our sins. Um, you know, it's funny saying that out loud because I remember back in the day, a lot of people used to think Avenged Sevenfold was like, are they a Christian band? And it's like, no, they were never really a Christian band, but there's so many interesting like themes and topics that you can talk about from religion. It's hard to like write songs about right or wrong, good and evil, or anything like that, and not use anything from religion, right? So anyway, we get into the pre-chorus. Oh, last thing is halfway through the verse. Again, like we get a little break from those guitar harmonies, and then they are just right back in our face within like a few seconds. But interestingly, I always find it interesting when Avenged Sevenfold does this. There is a lead up to the guitar harmonies come in, but it's only one guitar, and you can hear it in the right speaker. It's playing something like a do na 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 no no, and that no no is the guitar harmony. Take a listen. I'll sing along with it when it comes in, but it's like da na 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 na. So you can hear it there. So that one guitar plays and keeps playing, but then the harmony comes in on the downbeat. And I always kind of wonder, like, why did they decide to do that? Because they easily could have just written the harmony part for the set, you know, along with it, and had harmonies come in. Maybe they wanted that transition to be a little bit smoother. They didn't want the guitar harmonies to totally overpower the vocals yet, or at all. So there's just a lot of reasons, like really you could speculate on that, right? But obviously it was a conscious choice because they have plenty of guitar harmonies all over the place. They could have easily, you know, just recorded a guitar harmony there, but they didn't. So it's just interesting. But that's what I think. I think it's that they wanted that transition to be a little bit smoother and have the guitar harmony, or have those lead guitars gradually come in instead of like having both guitars come in at the same time. That's the best I can speculate. But yeah, here, let's play that one more time so you can hear. This song is very long. And so it's really hard for me to pick the exact spot on the track to select, even though I have all the timestamps here. So that's why it takes me a little while, or I might be a little off on where we come in. So here it is. So yeah, it's a very, you might even miss it if you're not paying attention to it the first time, and then before you know it, if you weren't paying attention, you'll be in the second half of the chorus, and then you'll realize, oh, they're playing guitar harmonies here. I didn't even realize they came in. So kind of cool. But let's get into the post chorus. Okay, so this post chorus, um, it's kind of interesting. First off, musically, like in terms of music theory, it's a little bit of a key change. They play kind of a strange note. They play a D sharp there, which is why it sounds a little intense, that key change. But then they smooth it out by having the vocals be a little more harmonized. The drums switch to a more intense beat, which actually the drum beat is nuts, which we'll take a look here in a second. And then they add this, I wouldn't call it shreddy, but it is kind of a very fast, very super quick, super melodic lead guitar part here. So let's just hear that again. Let's focus in on the lead guitar for a second, because I think that'll be something to talk about. Yeah, so it's a super fast. You know, sometimes, especially on this album, you hear stuff and it's like, man, that's just really cool. Like, it sounds great. I don't know if I can speak much more to it as, like, being like thematically helpful to anything. It's just a cool little part. Um, this song is a it's brutal on guitar. It is brutal. It is huge. But it's like, okay, after coming, I guess coming out of that like more groove oriented chorus, it kind of reminds you like this is a fast song. This is like a shreddy song. Like, don't think that we're gonna keep it slow for too long. Um, so yeah, it's a cool guitar part. A lot of fun to play if you want to go and learn it. It's not as hard as it sounds actually. So yeah, cool section, and it smooths out the transition between these chords because it starts with a D sharp chord and then I believe it moves to an F chord. Uh, so yeah, it's like a kind of a key change happening here, so that little guitar part helps smooth the key change out. Um, so now let's talk about the drums, because the drum beat here is ridiculous. I don't even quite know exactly what he's doing. Here we go. So it's like the cymbal is on the offbeat, so it's like down, down, the snare is on these really open, like it's a very open snare, and he's doing nut stuff on the kick drum, so it's like something like that. Take a listen. Oh my god, it's so hard to like get the sound or get the exact second that I want. So it's like dum 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 dum. That's kind of what they're doing. Again, it's just nuts. The Rev is insane. One of the most insane drummers ever. Love his. I love his drum work. It is so cool. Now with that said, by having really fast kick, but then having the cymbal and the snare be a little more spacious, it makes this part sound very intense, but also very open. I think that fits with the lead guitar part. I said that it's not really a shreddy lead guitar part. It is fast, but it's really melodic. So that this part is meant to both sound intense and driving, but also be a little bit more open and not necessarily intense in a thrashy way. I think snare placement is like key to that, by the way. Like, where you put the snare is it really sets the, you know, the intensity of the section. Uh, Also, with that said, the rhythm guitar is playing open notes, like just straight, like it just plays the chord and it leaves it open. Um, so yeah, it's a nice, it's an interesting section. Um, I do think I would be remiss if I didn't say it that it seems a little I don't want to say it's not necessarily random, but it does seem like they had this section here and maybe it was a little rough, but then they just decided to layer a ton of stuff onto it in order to smooth it out. And I think they did it. I still think it's a really great part, but you can tell like they were just like just throw the book at this section to make it work. And that's maybe not the best way to go about it. You know, if a section's not quite working, it's not quite working. I'm not saying that this isn't working. I actually think it works really well, but it's that's just how this part feels. So yeah, hear it again. So yeah, the vocals, I didn't talk about the vocals, right? So he went from having kind of these double layered takes on the chorus, which sound really nice and emphasize things well, to God only knows how many vocals are playing here. It's probably, it sounds like he's got multiple harmonies. He probably double tracked a lot of the harmonies as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have like 8 or 9 vocal tracks playing at the same time on this part. Going, you know, we won't be here tomorrow. Hold on to me for one last time. With that said, I will say that thematically fits with the song because that is kind of like the last cry of humanity. It's really like the final message of this song is this hold on to me for one last time. So it's meant to be the voices of all of the people as they go through the apocalypse. So it does work thematically having, you know, 9 vocal tracks playing at the same time, but it is a lot. So here, play it. Let's hear it again. So real quick, you know, this song is definitely not meant to be any sort of a tearjerker, like by any stretch, right? Like it's a cool song about the end of the world, right? But I do think it's important when you're writing songs like this to not get lost in the plot. And what I mean is like literally, if you have plot in your song, you need to remember that the point of a plot or the point of a story is to have some message like to the art, right? Like there should be a reason for it. It shouldn't just be plot for plot's sake. Um a good way for me to explain this is like you could ask ChatGPT to come up with a actually I'm not even going to use something like that. I'm going to talk about like you can go on forums and on Reddit, like you could go to like a sci-fi Reddit or something like that and find short stories written by people who talk about like, you know, mystical inventions and scientific wonders that are out of this world. And when you think about like all of the fictional universes that have been created by everyone in humanity that you could probably find on Reddit, there's millions of them, right? But there's only a few, like a select few, that actually resonate with people and go on to form their own, like, you know, mythoses for, you know, that's kind of the best way I can put it. So you look at something maybe like Star Trek or Star Wars, Warhammer 40K, Halo. You know, there are these fictional universes out there that really catch on and that people are very passionate about. And a lot of that is because these fictional universes that people would create, the lore and the plot behind them is rooted in some core human psychological uh what's the word, trait. I mean, there's something there that resonates with the listeners and the viewers of or the people experiencing this fictional universe, right? Whereas, you know, you could read a story on Reddit that has all of this great, you know, stuff behind it, but then there's no good characters and there's no good storyline, there's no reason to actually get involved into that world, right? No reason to invest into it. um that's what I mean by getting lost in the plot. Like you've built the world, but you didn't do anything with it. Uh, there's plenty of games like that where you'll look at the game and you'll think, "Oh, this game looks really good, and the world that they built looks really cool." But then, what do they do with it? And it's like nothing. So then the story falls flat, and nobody is really that interested in it. you could look at something like BioShock, right? Not as an example of that being done badly, but as an example of it being done wonderfully, where like the world of Rapture in the game BioShock is fantastically made, but then what really keeps you going is the character of Andrew Ryan, and then you have this. There's I don't want to spoil it, but like there's a great plot twist in that game that really speaks to like it can kind of speak to you on a human level, and it's something to think about, like control and influence that people can have on you without you even knowing, and like what is it like to be manipulated, and how does that that's something that everyone can kind of resonate with. And so there's a reason why that game is very popular, and it's not just because of the world and the story and the plot, but it's because of it's grounded in humanity and the human experience. So even on a song like this, which is very much, lore plot, like it's this crazy epic end of the world song. There's no one specific character. It's just this over the top extravaganza. He's still M Shadows, the singer, still has the knowledge to write, like ground those final lines in something very human, and that's what those lines are. We won't be here tomorrow. Hold on to me for one last time. It's like, yeah, we're all gonna die. What would be going through somebody's mind when they know that the world is coming to an end? It's like there's a definite fear, but you'd want to hold those who are closest to you. And so, yeah, that's really what I wanted to say is like when you're creating stuff, don't get lost in the plot. Like ground that in the human experience. But you can also do that. Let me be clear. You can also do that without losing your setting or losing your uh lyrical environment or the motifs and the musical nature of the song. So that brings me to my point, and I even put this in my notes, that I think this is a good place to pause for just a second. First, because I want to drink some water. Okay. Um, but also because we're only a minute and a half into this song. Actually, I'm sorry. Let's do that in just a second. We do have another post chorus section to go through real quick. Right there. So it's sort of this dark, twisted riff. Like listen to the rhythm guitar is going like down, 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 like very over the top. Like again, that orchestra. Those almost sound like something horns would play, like bum bum bum. Here, let me play the full thing. Right, so little crazy guitar riff happening there, very dark, like as you end with that hold on to me for one last time, like let's really emphasize it with this short little bridge, right? Let me listen to the drums real quick. Yeah, so the drums are just following along with the rhythm of the guitars. So everything is emphasizing these big, rhythm guitars, with the lead guitar actually taking a bit more of like a background thing, but just still keeping it kind of evil and dark sounding. And then we come back into Harmony Riff B from the intro. So yeah, okay, now that we got that out of the way, there's not really too much to talk about. It's just a very short, ominous riff to accentuate what was said lyrically in the section prior. So at this point, we're about a minute and 25 seconds into this song, and I just want to point out how much has been established. There's been like no time wasted whatsoever, and there is so much that has happened already. We have a solid musical direction. This dark orchestral thrash, which has been shown with crazy guitar harmonies, fast drums, fast rhythm guitars and bass. These also like twisted sounding guitar melodies, lyrics that are very poetic and speak of these high level concepts. Which that's the next thing I want to note is like we've established our lyrical topics and the setting, which is kind of the biblical end of the world. We have core themes, which is like the reflection on our sins, fearing the consequences of like mankind as a whole, fearing the sort of heavenly consequences of their of their actions, and most of the musical motifs have been established. We have, the melody, like the core rhythms of the song, the core uh, sections are there. Um, yeah, there's just so much that's been done, and we've just had so many sections here too, but none of them have felt wasted or out of place. I know I harped a little bit on that post chorus, but it's 7 seconds long, and it's very cool. It's a very interesting section. The drum beat is awesome. The guitar lead is fast and smooth and really cool. And it has really what you could consider like the heart of the lyrics, right? About like hold on to me for one last time. So even though I think musically it might be a little jarring, I don't think it's bad. I actually think it's still a really great section. So, but yeah, I mean, having different, multiple sections of intro, uh extra little measures, the extra measure in the verse to build us up, the chorus and pre-chorus almost being like this merged thing that smoothly flow into each other, two different post-chorus bridges followed by a return to dual harmony riff B from the intro, so we're not letting that harmony part go to waste. Which they could have done both of them. They could have gone back to dual guitar riff A and B, but they had the I don't know what you call it, the wherewithal to say no. We've just given a lot, like thrown a lot at them. Let's give them the guitar riff that's maybe has a little bit more space to it, instead of throwing them right back into crazy 16th notes thrash, which was what you would get with guitar riff A. Um, let's give them the one that has a little bit more space. And specifically, I'm talking about this riff. I'm talking about this. Right. So we're going to give them a little bit of room to breathe, but not too much, right? It's still an intense part. So there's just a lot, and we haven't broken theme once. All the lyrics are on point. It's just really good. So take a second here, appreciate everything that's going on, and then we can yeah, I just want to take a second because I think sometimes when you're going through these songs chronologically, especially like if we're going through a song that I don't think is as good, there's a lot of times where I'll critique it and say like, yeah, this broke the song, or this is bad, or like this is falling apart, or this is boring. And they've done so much here on this song, and I can't say that about any of it. It's all really good, really solid stuff, very interesting and unique, um, high quality musicianship. So yeah, with that said, we actually can get through the next few sections, the verse, pre-chorus, and chorus, very quickly because there's no change on them. Uh, which is fine. I think that when you look at the length of time between like the start of the verse to the end of the chorus, it's really only about 30 seconds. So like for example, verse 1 starts at 24 seconds, and then chorus 1 uh starts at 57 seconds. So like what is that? 33 seconds there. Hold on, I need to drink some water. So about 33 seconds for verse and pre-chorus, and then the chorus 1 is only about 20, about, is that 15 seconds? 16, yeah, about 16 seconds or so, which is very short. But they do double the second chorus, so we get a little bit more there. But yeah, so the verse, pre-chorus, and first half of the chorus are all the same, no change musically. So let's just go through them kind of quickly, and the main thing that we'll talk about are the lyrics. All right, so instead of like playing through all of that in long form because it's going to absolutely wreck me in terms of copyright strike, let's just talk about the lyrics separately. So verse 2, the lyrics are, "We've grown into the numbers 666. War breaks, a sign of the end, eternally expelled. Look to the sky for knowledge, the stars align tonight. Eclipse in heaven shall fall. Now I know I've seen it all in my life of misery." So the first verse set up the conflict as something that was impending, like it's coming at, like it's happening. Like it's sort of a warning. Uh, this second one actually starts to describe like the end of the world. Like here it is. Like it was foretold in the first verse, and now it's coming to pass. Here's the initial stages, right? Like war is breaking out. There's an eclipse, heaven's falling. Like a lot of really strong imagery here that sets up the visuals for the song. But then you get little lines like looking to the sky for knowledge, which means like as the apocalypse starts, where mankind is still trying to find some solution. But it ends with, you know, the line, now I know I've seen it all in my life of misery, because it's like you thought you had, maybe you thought you'd seen it all, and it's like now you know, because heaven's falling. I mean, that's literally the line before it. Eclipse in heaven shall fall. Now I know I've seen it all in my life of misery. Um, yeah, a lot of really great imagery here, setting the scene wonderfully. Um, yeah, I don't have too much else to say. It's the apocalypse is happening. All of these lyrics are very well made, very something else that's kind of, it's something that happens that like uh you know what I just noticed? I don't know if these rhyme. So I don't typically have to worry about this with Avenged Sevenfold. They're really good about like rhyming their words, unlike certain artists who just don't seem to care. But yeah, so I don't think these actually rhyme, but they seem to work fine. I've never noticed that before. So we've grown into the numbers 666. War breaks a sign of the end, eternally expelled. He like almost makes expelled and 66 rhyme. Let me play that. Number 666, war breaks the sign of the end, eternally expelled. Yeah, kind of interesting. Anyway, all right, I don't want to get too into the rhyming stuff. I don't think it's as important here. It doesn't seem, I never noticed it. And usually if something isn't rhyming, it sticks out to me like a sore thumb. I'm a huge stickler about that. Uh, but yeah, however, whatever way he's phrasing this melody or this rhyme scheme, it seems to work well enough. What about the first one? Yeah, so in verse 1, he says, man's becoming more corrupt now, godless, wicked, and cruel. The soulless man stood silence. Mary's words rang so true. Chastisement words worse than the flood, spread the word, it's all through. So actually he rhymes everything in the first verse. It's just the second verse, it's a little bit off. Um Interesting. Anyway though, yeah, so we're just continuing to expand the imagery and the lore of the song. Like there's an eclipse happening, heaven's falling, we're looking for a way out, but it's just not happening. And now I know I've seen it all in my life of misery. So then we bust back into the pre-chorus. So then one of the only changes that is, I mentioned this before, the pre-chorus vocals change the background vocals. They're a little bit more intense this time. Little slyer. So he comes in with a full yeah. Okay, so then we get into the chorus. Everything's the same here. I'm just gonna fast forward through it so I don't get obliterated by copyright strikes. But then we get into now fun stuff. Another pretty cool songwriting trick is you just double your chorus with new lyrics and new things. So here, let's check out the second half of the chorus. All right, so a few things happen musically. One, most prominently to me, is that the drums change to, I mentioned this earlier, they changed to blast beats, which, you know, blast beats are like having the snare on the one and the kick on the two, right? So batu batu batu. But he's actually, weirdly enough, he's playing like slow blast beats. When you think of blast beats, they're usually very fast, like bata 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 bata. But he's doing this like batu batu batu, which is really bizarre. But it works great. I mean, it just elevates this second chorus. It changes it and elevates it just enough so that you can still have the slower guitars, the relatively slow vocals behind it. All of that is still working fine, and have these very ethereal guitar harmonies in the background. It all still sounds fine, so he's not like overpowering all of that, but it does elevate the section a little bit and differentiate it from the first half of the chorus. So here, listen to that change again. So something that's cool here is that, you know, on the first half of the chorus, the guitar harmonies aren't there, and then they come in, which is something I already talked about, how they lead in with that one guitar. But now they stay here, so you actually still get the guitar harmonies playing, and they actually come in on playing at the start of the second half. So they had to write a whole new section. They had to complete the guitar harmony part in order to have it for the full chorus, or for this full repetition. So you actually get a little bit more guitar harmony work. It's a little bit more complicated. Like basically what I'm saying is if you have the first half, but the guitars are only on the second half of the first half of the chorus, but then you have the second half of the chorus and the guitars are on both halves of that, they actually wrote the first half of the second half of the chorus to be a little bit more complicated. So that way, when you have this second chorus or second half of the chorus added on later on in the song, it sounds a little bit more intense because you're hearing the first half with guitar harmonies for the first time. I don't know if that makes sense. Basically, what I'm saying is that you get this really cool guitar harmony section that you wouldn't have heard before because they weren't playing in the first half of the first chorus. So here, check it out. So they play like this full arpeggiation, and then they repeat the same thing that they were doing on the whenever they played in the second half of the first chorus. See, hear that? So that's the same thing that we heard here. So kind of cool stuff. Just again, an interesting thing where like they could have taken the easy route and made it very simple, but they actually decided to enhance the orchestration on the second half of the chorus whenever you get the guitar harmonies there for the whole time. Right here. So yeah, just putting in the work. Putting in the work. Okay, so let's talk about the lyrics real quick. So melodically, everything's the same. We're doing relatively the same melody, but the lyrics here are actually a little bit more revealing about the state of mankind. So they are, dust the apple off, savor each bite, and deep inside you know Adam was right. Lust and power, indulgence, no fear. Left with his sins, how does this end? Yeah, so I totally read this as maybe a little bit of a statement about mankind's arrogance. So if the first half of the chorus is mankind, you know, pity us, oh, we're so sorrowful, right? Feel sorrow for mankind's last chance to survive and all of this stuff. Like we tried our best, a stab in the dark and all of that, right? These lyrics are like, you guys are sinners. Lust and power, indulgence, no fear, which specifically, if we're talking like biblical references, that could be like no fear of God. That's a common thing, is that you need to fear God, and as in respect, right? Like the classical version of fear is almost synonymous with respect. So if you don't fear God, that means that you don't respect him. And then finally, it's left with his sins. How does this end? Yeah, you could say, I almost want to say like this is referencing Adam, where he says, "And deep inside, you know, Adam was right. Lust and power, indulgence, no fear. Left with his sins. How does this end?" I don't think that he's referencing Adam. I think that he's saying left with his sins is referencing mankind as a whole. Like when mankind is left with his sins, how does this all end? That's just my take on it. I think that this is more of a, you know, again, kind of like with the line about Mary, I don't want to get into specifically like what does he mean Adam was right. It's take it kind of like a for the whole of what it is, which is a statement about mankind's lust of power, their indulgence, no respect for God. um the first chorus, you might have thought that, oh, they're pitiable, we feel bad for them, and it's like, no, actually mankind almost deserves this, right? Dust the apple off, savor each bite. It's like, not great. So then we still end with the "We won't be here tomorrow, hold on to me for one last time." Let's get to the end. So now, if, after the first chorus, you might have thought, okay, we feel bad for humanity. They're pitiable. This is an emotional human moment that, like, we won't be here tomorrow, hold on to me for one last time. I think that this takes on a little bit of a new context with the second chorus, where it's now it's we won't be here tomorrow, hold on to me for one last time, but it's like, oh, actually you guys deserve it. And I think that that shows with, again, you could say I'm reading into this a little too much. I don't think so. I think that this is all kind of intentional. We go into the guitar solo, which is not a happy, hopeful guitar solo. It is a slick, evil, snaky guitar solo. So let's hear a little bit, because there is like a post chorus. It's not really a post. How can I describe this? It's more like a short bridge, which brings us into the guitar solo. The drums are going nuts. The guitars are playing like these super heavy rhythm chugs, like John, 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 like imposing rhythmic stuff happening. And then the lead guitar is going absolutely insane. So here, let's take a listen. Okay, so that's all crazy. Let's break it down just a little bit. So pay attention to those guitars, that dun 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 dun, really, really heavy. And then the drums are just going bonkers. They're just going crazy. So they're going like da 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 da, some crazy double bass rhythm that I can't even think of. So nuts stuff. Let me just talk about this and get the rhythms and drums out of the way, and then we'll talk about the solo. So the background music, so we have all of that craziness going on with the drums and rhythms there, but we actually come right back into the chorus music. So if you pay attention, it's back to that like dun 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 dun. So the basically the guitar solo is playing over the same music as the chorus. So like, just for context, here you go. Here. So yeah, same music, kind of interesting. I didn't know that until I was doing a little bit of research into this song. So yeah, but it's cool because I think it's a really great little progression that they've got, and for them to use it here, it's I mean, you can come up with, you can kind of like I don't know what you call it, fan fiction your way into like thematic relevance, right? Like, oh, the guitar solo isn't supposed to add something new here. It's actually continuing the themes that we were talking about in the chorus. So like the condemnation of mankind. So it makes sense to just keep it going. Whereas there are other songs where the guitar solo is actually like, it evolves the song a little bit. It takes us into somewhere new and different. Um, you can say that however you want to interpret it. It's kind of the interesting thing about instrumental only sections like guitar solos, is that they, without lyrics, without words and lyrics, it's kind of hard to tell, or you really have to use your brain to think about like, what does this mean for the song. Sometimes a guitar solo is just awesome, right? Like, it's just cool having it. But I think when you get into more purposeful songwriting, it's like you need to be careful about, am I just throwing this in here because it's cool, or does it actually mean something to the song? Um, I think similar to the post chorus, I don't know if this is meant to be thematically relevant to the song, though I will say musically it fits all of the themes of the song, but I don't know if the solo as a section totally fits. I think you could make the argument that it does, but uh regardless, it is a very cool solo and it does fit the themes, even if its place in the song is not necessarily required. So yeah, with that said, so like I know that may seem a little contradictory, but I guess what I'm saying is that I don't know if the song needed this here, but I'm glad that it has it. It works really well and I wouldn't remove it. I think that's the point that I'm trying to make. And I say that as a guitarist who loves guitar solos, right? Like you kind of have to at some point be smart about where you're putting your guitar solos and what they mean for the song, if anything, right? So okay, so now we can talk about the guitar solo. Which hold on, let me make sure I've got the. I'm gonna kind of skip over that. Well, no, I won't. Let's go back over into that guitar solo bridge. So that is just nuts. That's about it. Yeah, it's just crazy. It's absolutely insane. So how do we want to break this down? So that first part there is definitely meant to like make it clear to us that we are getting into the guitar solo. Like so this isn't just like some other random part or some other section. Like this is specifically going to be the guitar solo, and this is going to be a very shreddy, intense guitar solo. And so we have this initial like here, let's break down the little section. So that right there is simply just a lead in. I can tell you, like, as someone who writes guitar solos, that is meant to show us, like, yeah, we're in the guitar solo now. But people's first thought whenever they hear, okay, the guitar solo is coming, it's like, okay, what kind of guitar solo are we getting? Which he then clarifies very quickly with this. We are getting a super crazy shreddy guitar solo. We are getting something that is absolutely nuts. So right off the bat, we have established what kind of guitar solo this is going to be. It's going to be a little evil, little, because that's what those first few notes were like, right? Like they, which funnily enough, he's hitting a tritone there, which again, remember how I said that they pick their off notes, and this song has a lot of tritone in it. That's what that note is. I'll point it out. That note right there, it goes duh duh. That duh is the tritone, and that's why it has this. I mentioned how it was maybe a little more in your face than the typical off note. It doesn't sound sly. It actually builds a lot of tension, and it's very much like it's a strong note. It's a note that like Metallica and Black Sabbath use a lot to get their darkest, heaviest riffs, and so it has this feeling of tension building, but also very strong and in your face. It's not like sly or evil or sneaky. So yeah, right there, that woo-doo. But then we get into this crazy shred section. I'm not even going to begin to break this down. Just know that it's meant to be just insane nutso shred. Okay, so now we get into the main guitar solo, which, okay, no pun intended, but this solo is wicked as hell. It is a wicked, sinister sounding solo. It is like a snake. I'm going to just read my notes for it. It is like a snake winding through various melodic segments and shred schemes. It's unpredictable, but smooth, shreddy, but melodic. It is unbelievably difficult to play. It is very high level, but it captures, again, I talk about like the dark orchestral element of this song. It captures both of that. It is thrashy, crazy, shreddy, but also very smooth and evil and composed. So yeah, let's go through each of the little sections, and I'll just kind of break down maybe what he's doing on the guitar end, because that is something I can do pretty well. So here. So right there, he's playing long notes. This is something Synyster Gates does a lot, where he goes back and forth between these different long notes, but leads into those longer notes with very fast notes. So like down, like that type of thing. He's really good at doing that and doing it in interesting ways. Now, the notes, if you listen to those long notes individually, they have this really like whiny, twisted sound. Listen real quick. Like that. You hear it's like wow. It's not a wah pedal or anything like that. What he's doing, this is a like guitar picking technique where when you hold the pick, it's called like choking up on the pick, meaning like you move your, so imagine you're holding a guitar pick, right? And you pluck the string. There is going to be a certain amount of distance between your thumb where you're holding it and then the string where it's getting plucked, right? If you move your thumb closer to the end of the pick, so much so that it actually almost, whenever you pluck a string, you actually touch the string a little bit with your thumb. Well, first off, that's how you get a pinch harmonic, but I'm not even going to talk about that. But if you do that right, you actually will create like a twang in the string, and then the longer the note goes on, the string actually loses that twang as it continues to vibrate, because that's what happens when you pluck a guitar string, right? Is you're actually just making the string vibrate, which creates sound. So when you hit it with your thumb kind of touching it very lightly, you give it a little bit of a twang, and then over time it loses that twang, and that's what the string is doing when it goes wow, and it turns into a normal note. So listen for that again. It's very fast, and I know like if you're not like super guitar nerd, you might not hear it, but just listen to how that note, like it sounds like it's going meow. Right here. And it kind of evens out to a more normal note. Let's see if I can get that one more time on the right second. Hear that? It's very subtle, but it's definitely there. He does that a few more times too. He actually keeps this little rhythmic pattern where he goes like diddle 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 down, diddle 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 down. So here, listen, because he'll do it more. He doesn't do it there, but yeah. So that's how you get that really like. I think it sounds like snaky. Like it's sly. It's yeah. It actually matches M Shadow's vocals really well. So that's a whole nother thing, but yeah, it's very cool. And so that's what he's doing in order to get that like whiny sound, is he's touching the string very lightly with his thumb, and then as the note goes on and he's like moving the string with his left hand, which is actually on the fret, it evens out the sound of the guitar note. So yeah, let's see, let's keep going. So he enters this little rhythmic scheme where it's like and he continues to kind of define it and add notes. So continuing to build, and then right when he reaches like a peak or a climax as he's going up, he finds a really awesome smooth way to come back down here with slides and pull-offs and stuff. So all of that right there, super cool way to get us back down into lower notes, so that you can start to build the tension back up again. But it is a little bit slower than like some of the other stuff. It's kind of just straight, I think it's 16th notes, da 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 da. So then he reminds us like, no, this is a shred solo. So we throw in some shredding. So again, like all of this is very fluid. We're working our way up. Crazy shred. And then instead of continuing to do that same pattern, he does a little bit of a unique thing here. Check this out. So that's like a little transition because the rhythms are actually repeating there. So it brings them back around. And then he goes into a new rhythmic scheme. So he goes da 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 na 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 na. So yeah, again, continuing to build up. We're building the tension still. So like notice how all these sections are very smoothly moving in and out of each other, even though he'll throw these very fast notes like in there. Really cool. And like again, I love Synyster Gates. He's one of my favorites of all time, and it's stuff like this where you can really hear his specific sound and style come out, because it's just all great. Yeah, and it fits this all perfectly. Like it fits the style and sound that they're going for so well. Okay, let's keep going. Let's listen to that next section in its full. Okay, so that's a really good example of he used slides to get this like really warped, and then he choked up on the pick on that last note to give it that like twang again. So listen for that. Right here. And then, so at this point, we've had, we had the first section of the solo, like that little bridge where he did the lead in and then the shred, like just really intense shred. Then we have the solo start with a little bit more of a melodic buildup, which then ends in that very smooth come down. I think it was right here. Yeah, that right there. And then we get a little moment of shred just to remind us, yeah, this is an intense solo. And then we come back around to more melodic buildup again. But now we're sort of starting to really build into a climax, and so he knows he's running out of time, like, so he's got to get this solo stepped up a little bit. So we're gonna get this very fast, we're gonna get this really final melodic section, which is really has like slides. He's choking up on the pick. This is like a very snaky sounding part here, right here. And now it's like, okay, we have to get this solo going, so we're going to have insane shred basically. Now the climax of this solo is what are called sweeps, which like arpeggiated sweeps. But he doesn't want to just go straight into that. He wants to set up a little bit of shred first and then go into that. So yeah, you're gonna hear him do a whole lot of fast notes right now, and then you're gonna hear it almost go into a little bit more of a composed, controlled. It's still fast, but it's gonna be this up and down as he goes through the sweeps. So here, take a listen. Right, so you hear it's like we have this final melodic section. So it's very controlled shredding. So here, let's take a listen. So yeah, huge climax, super shreddy. One of the shreddiest moments on this album, honestly. You know, I think Synyster Gates was one of the people that really brought like sweep picking to the mainstream. I mean, I remember talking to people in high school and stuff about sweeping, and they were like, "Yeah, sweep like Synyster Gates." And I remember watching like instructional videos on him doing it. He certainly wasn't like the first one to do it or like a pioneer of it or anything. I mean, John Petrucci and Alexi Laiho were doing it before him, but he threw it in songs like this and backcountry especially. That I know that for a while he was kind of synonymous with sweeping. And he kind of does a little bit of a different type of sweep picking too. He throws in like a lot of economy picking in there, so he very rarely just does straight up sweeps. And funnily enough, even in those sweeping shred sections, he's playing. I know I've mentioned it a few times, but like those off notes that I've talked about, the harmonic, major seventh, and then like the tritone, those are in those sweeps as well. So even when he's doing all of these crazy fast notes, he's still modulating like the arpeggios to include these off notes to keep it in sort of musical theme with the rest of the song. So here, let's listen again. Yeah, it's just nuts. It's just nuts. So that is clearly like a musical climax. It's super intense, crazy stuff, which leads us into, so right there with that being like the big musical climax that it is, it's the perfect time for us to break into a whole new thing, right? We'll talk about that in just a second. Almost done with the solo. So finally, he ends it all with a dive bomb followed by a slow pick scrape. That's what that, you know, metallic like scraping sound is. It's him scraping his pick across the strings. So here, that right there. The last note I wanted to make on this is that so those sweeped arpeggios follow the background chords that are being played. It's very well mixed. I want to note that it's actually a little dirty and messy. Most metal guitarists, when they do stuff like this, they go out of their way to just make it sound perfect. Like every note is perfect, and it to the point where to me it honestly doesn't even sound like a guitar anymore. Like you might as well just replace it with like some type of synth, you know, just like like it just sounds like picture perfect. But this, you know, a big thing with the mix on this whole album is that it's very dirty and raw. And so even when he does a shred section like this, it doesn't sound perfect. It doesn't sound not like a guitar. Like it still sounds very much like a guitar, which to me actually emphasizes like how cool it is, because the guitar is a cool instrument and it's meant to sound a little dirty and messy. And so when you hear somebody playing the guitar like this, where it is dirty and messy and it sounds like a guitar, but he's just like playing just unbelievably fast notes, right? Like right here. Like it just has such an impact. Like there's something like raw about that that I love. Um, I just want to point that out. I mean, you know, Synyster Gates is certainly not the most technical guitarist on the planet, but he's very, very, very good. But one thing that he's always been good about is understanding that the guitar is, it is supposed to sound human. And when you mix everything to the point where it just like overproduce the sound and get the perfect exact take and comp it to the point where it doesn't even sound like a human could realistically play it, it doesn't, it loses, it actually loses something there, you know. So it's cool. Like I think that's a point of appreciation that I want to throw at this part in particular. I think most people are just in awe of how like technically impressive it is, but I love the mix and the sound and the way that it is, because it is a little dirty. Like you can hear the strings uh you know, distorting a little bit. You know, it's hard to hear, especially if you're not like, if me as a guitarist who can play this part and can play stuff like this doesn't sound as fast to me. Like this kind of clicks in my head. Like I can pick out each individual note mentally. Most people when they hear this, it just sounds like a blur. It's crazy, right? Like it's like moving at 50, you know, it's like driving at 80 miles per hour, looking out the window, like everything's just flying by, right? And so it's hard for you to pick it out. But if you listen very closely, you can hear how it's just a little strained and a little rough. Like try listening. I don't know if you can hear it or not. If you can, cool. But if you can't, just maybe just trust me there. Like or go listen to some other like shred bands and listen to how they do their sweeps and how they just sound perfect. Like they're flawless to a fault compared to this, right? I think that, you know, I think you'll see what I mean. Um but yeah, overall, phenomenal solo. Definitely one of the shreddiest solos he's ever done. Synyster Gates doesn't typically do just straight sweeps. In fact, this might be the only time he actually does just straight up sweeps. And even then, they're still modulated with those off notes, so it's not even like straight arpeggios. It's kind of altered arpeggios. But anyway, yeah, really cool, really great stuff. So that brings us into the clean interlude. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to pause it there. So right now it's just the clean guitar playing, right? I mean, we've let the guitar chords kind of take a step back. The guitar chords in the background, like the rhythm guitars, they faded out. The lead guitar did, it's dual harmony, or sorry, it's a dive bomb and then pick scratch just to build the tension. But really, we're bringing the energy down a little bit. So at this point, we are 3 minutes. Well, it comes in, the clean guitar comes in at 3 minutes and 30 seconds roughly. And so, a whole lot's happened, a whole lot of stories happen. We know, okay, humanity probably deserves this. They've been bad, to put it lightly. And so, but what's actually going to happen? That's the question, like, that he asked at the end of the second chorus, which is, left with his sins, how does this end? So now it's kind of time. It's like, all right, this is, maybe you could see this as like that moment of like that moment of tension, like this last moment of peace, as the world begins to end. They mentioned like an eclipse and heaven falling. Like if you've ever seen like Berserk, right? You know that the image of an eclipse, it's very, and even if you've seen an eclipse in real life, right? Like if you're with other people waiting for it, it's this tense wait as you wait for like darkness to cover everything. It's really cool. We had an eclipse out in Texas about a year ago, and it was a total eclipse, and it literally turned to nighttime. It was like being in nighttime for about 3 minutes. It was crazy. So I think that this imagery here of the clean guitar playing by itself after all of this craziness, it's very cool. It works extremely well. And it kind of evokes that like ominous foreboding imagery. So yeah, let's hear this clean guitar again. So another thing I want to note, so this is the guitar is playing. um I explained what arpeggios are on the last episode, but in case you don't know, arpeggios are like the single note versions of chords. A chord is when multiple notes are played at the same time. And so he's playing arpeggios of the chord of the underlying chords, right? Something to note is that the chords are actually, we're going back and forth between two chords. We're going back and forth between a D minor and A major 7, which A major 7 is a tension building chord in the key of D minor. So you know, we're just kind of swaying back and forth. That's what the progression between these two chords sounds like. We continue to do it until this cello comes in. Right there. I want to pay attention to that right there because it's extremely significant. Let's go back just a little bit. So all of this has felt very smooth, and you might not have even noticed it, but we're actually in a completely different key right now. Totally, totally different key. We're in F minor. Um, you could say we're in kind of a modulated version, or like a different mode of F minor, like C minor, C minor. I think it's Mixolydian, maybe. But yeah, essentially we're in F minor now, and that happens extraordinarily smoothly and very cleverly. Um, I know, like, I do want to talk about the theory here because this is some of the best theory I've ever seen, and it's like using theory to tell a story, right, on its own with just music. It's very cool. So let's come back. So here. So what happens there is that we actually go from playing we will go from playing D minor, instead of going to A major 7, we go to A flat major. And it's a very subtle change. And the cello, the melody that the cello is playing is it kind of hides that because the cello is playing a very natural melody for the cello, right? So you wouldn't even really notice that the change is that significant, but it's actually a huge, huge, huge change. So let's listen again. So we're in D minor, right there. So that, from a chord perspective, going from D minor to A flat major, it's almost like you couldn't choose a more random chord. There couldn't be two chords that are like further apart, right? So A flat major is the A flat, first off, is the tritone, which again, remember I mentioned that tritone this whole time I've been talking about. Even if you don't know what it is, you know I've been talking about it. A flat is the tritone of D. So it is a note that has a ton of tension with D. And yet because of that cello, that cello really smooths out that transition. But going from D minor down to the to A flat chord is really weird. I think another thing that smooths it over is that we only have the cello, which is playing a melody on its own, but we also only have those guitar, like those light guitar notes, clean guitar playing as well. So there's not really a whole lot. Like if you heard a full band playing here and you heard that change, it'd stick out. You'd be like, what was that? You know? But because we just have this very calm, peaceful, clean guitar, and then we have this cello that's just kind of, it's just playing a nice melody. There's nothing crazy happening here. It completely hides the fact that we have just done something ridiculous with the theory. Um, Now, what does that mean? Like, I could talk about the theory all day, but what does that mean for the song? Well, it actually means that we enter this very like off-putting, but also kind of dreamy place in terms of the music. Then, which is why this sounds so dreamy and off-putting when you hear it, or not off-putting, but it's like it sounds so foreign and dreamy, like we're just in somewhere different, right? Like, and real quick, the choir that comes in as well, it emphasizes that dreaminess because the choir, it's like an additional thing on top of what we already have that we actually are able to use to, because it's playing notes in the key of F minor, right? We don't know that we're even in F minor yet. Like your brain might not have processed it. And so hearing these new notes come in, it's like we don't know that that's happened rationally, like to the average listener. So hearing these notes, they sound so new and unique because they are. They're notes that probably haven't been played in the rest of the song throughout the whole song. It's a whole different key, everything's changed, but we didn't even realize it. So listen to how dreamy and crazy everything sounds once that once those choirs come in. Boom. And it's like, so I'm pausing there because it does sound just bizarre, and like they know what they're doing, by the way. So they know, like, with the key switch, we're throwing the listener off without them even knowing it. And we want to enter this kind of dreamlike world, and then we make the choir actually sound dreamlike, like from a tonal perspective too. Like the choir doesn't, it's not going like, oh, like Gregorian chant or something, like it's a dreamy, like Nightmare Before Christmas choir. And so there's just multiple layers of like how we're going to get to this, how are we going to evoke the emotions and the thoughts and the feelings that we want to evoke with this section. Now what's funny is when we come into this part, uh we start off with the A flat, right? The A flat major is the first chord that like plays in this part. A flat, I don't know how to explain this, so I'm going to give it my best, but A flat is the relative major chord of F minor. So A flat major and F minor have the same notes. Like the key of A flat major is has all the same notes as the key of F sharp minor, or sorry, just F minor. So we actually come in on like the major chord, like the happiest version of the chord. But because it's so wacky compared to the D minor, because it's the tritone of D minor, it's happy, but it still sounds a little strange and ethereal. So that's this note right here. Hold on. Right here. It's an extremely happy note. Like we've entered the new key and we're on like the happiest part of that key, but we don't really know it yet because it's so strange compared to the chord that we heard before. But as we continue to play in that new key, we're going to go to different chords that aren't quite as happy, but it's still going to we're still going to have that light floaty feeling. And then what happens is even we're in this new key now, we're actually going to switch over to darker and darker chords until finally we end up at F minor, which is the darkest minor. Like that is the root note and that is the dark chord, and you'll know exactly when that is. So let's keep going, but we're floating right now, and then it's going to slowly get darker. So we're still playing, major chords and nice chords. This is major. This is major. But then right there, that's actually a tension building chord in the key of F minor that builds into F minor, but it's still a major chord. That's what's interesting. It's a major chord that builds tension into F minor. So now it's actually an eerie sounding chord, and it sets up, for those of you who don't, it's C major. So it's the harmonic minor version of C. So C major, which has E, it has E, like a natural E, which builds into F, the F minor. So now we've built this tension. So we're floating around in this new key using like relatively happy chords, but now we're building tension, and it's going to sound extremely dark when we finally get to the root minor note, which is F. Let's go again. Right here. So that's F minor, all of that. So you see what happened there? And like the horn comes in perfectly to like really allow us to slam down into that F minor. So long story short, this whole song is in D minor. We make this crazy transition into F minor, but it's like super effortless. And then we float around in F minor without actually playing the chord F minor for a bit. And then when we finally get to the chord of F minor, it sounds huge and impactful because we've been building up to it for a few chords. And we've also been layering on our cello, our choir, our strings, all of this stuff. And then we finally bring in this ominous horn that brings us into F minor. And so all that tension that we've been building comes to a point. So let's hear it again. Now, another thing that's very interesting here, there's a lot of things that are interesting, but a very interesting thing here is that they only do 3 chords. So they do the F minor, let's see, F minor to D flat to E minor, right? Which E minor is kind of a strange chord. I'm not gonna like E minor is a weird chord to play in the key of F minor. But long story short, they play 3 chords. Let me show you those chords. So that's F minor. And here's D flat major right there. And then E minor right here. So we only played 3 chords, which is kind of weird. Usually you would have 4 chords, but so now we're going to do 3 chords again. But here's what I want to emphasize is that we actually, the next section and the whole rest of the song after this is still in D minor. So we actually have to get back to D minor from where we're at. But So not only did we like, it's kind of funny, right? Like you wrote yourself into F minor and now you have to get yourself out of F minor. But they're going to do it by setting up, okay, there's only 3 chords here. So they're going to do 3 chords again and replicate it, but then they add a 4th chord to build tension back into D minor. It's kind of interesting. Like that 4th chord has a lot of tension to it, but so it's like twofold, right? It builds the tension a lot, but then it kind of sneakily gets us back into D minor. So let's hear it again here, or let's hear the next 3 chords. So back to F minor, right there. And then this is actually D minor, but it doesn't sound like it's resolving. It's building tension. And then C right here. And then that's the 4th chord. And then we're back at D minor there. So we go F minor, then D minor, but you heard when I said D minor, it doesn't actually sound like it's resolving. It sounds really off, right? Like F minor sounds like the resolution because it's still the key. But we go F minor to D minor to C major, which C major is a tension building chord in the key of F minor. Remember I mentioned C major earlier? So we're building a lot of tension in F minor, but then we play that one extra chord, which is actually D flat major, which builds us back into D minor. So here, let's listen to that whole thing again. All right, so we've got F, D flat, E. Now we come back to F and it resolves. F, D minor, but it sounds tense. C major, which builds tension in the key of F minor. D flat major, which builds even more tension, but gets us back to D. Very cool stuff. I know for people who don't know music theory, maybe that made little to no sense, but I just wanted to at least put that out there and explain what all of that was because I don't know. I think it's cool and I think it's fun to talk about. And it's like these little things where like you might not have ever noticed it or thought about it, but like, yeah, they have that one extra chord there. It sounds perfect in the song. It sounds great. It's building tension. It works. The imagery here is off the charts, right? Like the eclipse, the apocalypse is descending upon the world. It's all just crazy. But then like knowing that there's these little theory tricks that they're doing in order to make all of that happen, and then knowing that like that extra 4th chord is what actually allows us to resolve back to the original key of D minor, I think is just super cool. So yeah, all of that aside, this is like the final dark moment before the apocalypse actually takes place. So let's get into it. We've got the heavy bridge. Hold on, sit up for a second. Okay, so we've got this bridge here. Let's get into it. All right, so let's pause there. So a few things. We've got these low single note guitars that are harmonized with each other. Usually when you think of like harmony guitars, you think of like leads, high notes, but these low single note guitars actually give this section like this I it gives it like a solemn sound almost like dum 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 dum. It also means that because they're playing single notes instead of chords, which on an electric guitar are very distorted and very full, which you'll hear in a moment. It allows the orchestral elements to still pierce through very, very smoothly. So you can hear the choir and the horns and all of that stuff, even though there's guitars playing, because guitars they take up a lot of space in terms of the music and the sound. They're very big instruments. So uh, yeah, that's why they're doing this. It gives it a solemn sound, but still allows for like guitar intricacies, but also keeps the like musical frequency ranges clear so that the orchestral elements can be heard. The drums are also playing very slow as well. So even though like all the rock instruments came in, everything is still like keeping it's solemn. Like it's a very solemn section, especially after all of that crazy orchestral stuff that we heard. Let's hear that real quick. So yeah, it's huge, it's epic, it's moving very slowly, it's you know, it's solemn, but it's like solemn in a dark, heavy way, which fits perfectly with the lyrics. So the lyrics here are actually they're more like a sermon, right? Like as the prophets shed the light on what's to come, the crowds did gather. Your time is precious, they explained. No time to worry, Messiah's coming. Here, let's finish this out so you can hear those last lines. Your time. Love that little dun 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 dun. It just sounds huge and triumphant, and well, not triumphant. It actually sounds really dark and ominous, but it's got this grand scale, like it's elevating this section of the song, having those little like rhythmic motifs in it. Drums are building. So yeah, I love that the choir is actually following the guitars. Da, 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 da. Right here. So now, remember how I mentioned, actually real quick, I did leave a note here for this. I think that this is another place. So we're about 5 minutes and 10 seconds into the song, right? This is another really great spot to pause and talk about immersion, because, or at least appreciate the immersion, because we are like totally in the thick of it right now. You know, it's a really awesome place to be if you enjoy music and you enjoy great art. Like you've had so much happen up to this point. You've had these twists and turns, thrash, crazy guitar parts, shredding, post choruses, little extra beats here and there, a crazy solo guitar that is both shreddy but melodic. There's all these elements to it. The lyrics are prophetic and grand and huge. And then you have this massive, like wonderfully orchestrated interlude, which, you know, is that final moment of peace before the apocalypse. And then finally you end up here. And right now, you know, you're just in it, right? Like this is really that final moment. Like we're building up. It's great. It's a great place to be. Like it's just taken some time to appreciate that. Like everything has worked so well to get us to this point that they can play this kind of droning, slow guitar part, or not guitar part, but like section that just has so much weight to it. You know, the imagery is off the charts. I just feel like I'm transported to, you know, some crazy eclipse. The sky is red. There's meteors. It's nuts, right? So yeah, the amount of work that's gone in here from a skill standpoint, a songwriting, like song structuring standpoint, the compositions themselves, all of it, it's really immense, but it's been worth it, and it's a really great place to be. And we're not even done. So now this would be the part where it's like, okay, we got to make sure that we nail the finale of this song. So let's, which I think is coming up, like the climax to me is coming up. So I mentioned earlier how like those single note guitars keep things open enough for things to be heard. You're gonna hear the chords come in here, and you're gonna hear how the frequency ranges like fill up. It just sounds like this next section sounds really big and full, which actually adds to the emotional weight of it. So here, listen. Right there. You still hear those strings playing this wonderful melody in the background. So yeah, that little section there, I've called it like heavy bridge 2. So the first one that's like slow and droning, that's heavy bridge 1 with the prophet preaching to the masses. Heavy bridge 2, we bring in some guitars, the guitar chords, and then like an octave guitar as well, which just on a you know what, I'm not going to explain it. It just adds a little bit more emotional depth when you have like octave guitars. The drums also kind of go double time, so do ba, as opposed to that really like do ba doom. The strings are also following. It's like this really beautiful string section. Something I wanted to talk about with this bridge is that it is written specifically for this section. It's not repeated anywhere else. It's like it's a specific composition just for this moment. And I think that I also think this is like the lyrical climax of the song, which is why it's so impactful. His specific lines are, "Don't go to sleep tonight, darling. Hold me in your arms. These will be our final days, and I can't let go." And that, especially that, like, "I can't let go," it just sounds, I mean, it just sounds great. I mean, it sounds so sorrowful and powerful, the way that he sings it and the way it fades away, because they're gonna die, like they're all gonna die. That's the whole point. And I think at this point in the song, when he says "I can't let go," it's like that's the last time there's lyrics. Like, it's not true, there's a little bit of lyrics left, but these are like, this is the moment where it's become very clear that there's no turning back. The apocalypse is happening. It was hinted at in the first verse. It was, the humans mourned in the first chorus and felt sorrowful for themselves. It began in the second verse. We learned that the humans deserve it in the second chorus, and now here we are, and it's actually happening. So let's hear this again and really pay attention to that, like, "I can't let go." The strings. Na, na. Hear how like the whole time he's doing that, those strings are just so powerful. Na 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 da 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 na 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 na. And even the drums go from that like kind of, I mentioned that they're double time. I was talking about this part here. But they actually, when he says "go," they actually switch over to like blast beats. So the snare's on the downbeat. So we come right back into that heavy bridge again, but this time it's all instrumental, no vocals. And yeah, I think that the point of that is that there's no need for vocals. We know how this story is going to turn out. Um, and what's left is just for that final part to happen. So we'll talk about that in a second. But I do want to talk about bridges real quick, because I think, I hear a lot of songs today where the bridge feels like an afterthought. Hold on one second. Okay, cool. The bridge feels like an afterthought, where it's like, okay, we have to have a bridge, so we're just gonna repeat the same thing, or like repeat the chorus, something from the chorus. It's like, a bridge is a storytelling device. Like, that is the perfect time for like you to, add more flavor, or really it's where you're supposed to recontextualize the final chorus. If you're going to have a final chorus, right? Like, that is a moment where you can do so much with your song and your story. And you can really get creative. I mean, if you think about the bridge on this song, right? There's been like multiple bridge sections. You had the guitar solo itself could be considered like something of a bridge section, but then you have this massive sweeping orchestral thing. You have the heavy bridge where the prophet is preaching. You now have this bridge that we just finished with, where it we hammer home the final moments of humanity, saying like, "These will be our final days, and I can't let go." It's a really powerful moment. And then they've got another bridge here, and then guess what? There's about to be two more bridges after it, and then you could even consider the section after that a bridge, even though I would consider it verse 3. So it's like, the bridge section of a song is where you can just let loose and do whatever you want. So, use that to your advantage from both a storytelling standpoint and like a musical diversity standpoint, right? So I just want to talk about that because this is a good example of all the different possibilities that are available to you with bridges. So cool. Well, this section's instrumental, and yeah, we know how the story is going to turn out, and it's not going to turn out great for the people, for mankind. So let's dive into it. Right here. So that brings us back again. If you don't recognize it, that's the very first riff from the song, the guitar harmony riff A. It starts off with just one guitar, and then the second guitar comes in halfway through, and then we lead into this crazy nutso thing here. So it brings us. Remember, we talked so much about like the chaos at the beginning of the song in the first section. This is bringing us back to that to some extent. So here, listen. All right, so I just wanted to let all of that play out. I will probably get copyright strike to hell, but who cares? So there we are. I mean, that could be considered the musical climax, right? So let's back it up a little bit. So like obviously we're coming out of these epic parts, and we need to like the world's falling apart. So we go into this nutso dual harmony section. So this actually, from a guitarist standpoint, this actually isn't quite as complicated as it sounds. And if I'm being 100% real, if there's any section I think could have been a little bit better, and maybe didn't quite hit the mark, or at least I might have done it a little differently, it would be this one. I still think it's a great section, and I'll explain why. But to me, this section represents like this is the apocalypse, right? This is that apocalyptic section. And the next section does it too. This is the end of the world, and so it's supposed to just sound insane and otherworldly, and I think it does. But I do think it could have been a little crazier and more chaotic. I think that it's a little too orchestrated and organized. Musically, it's so I said it's not as complicated. Really, what it is just a call and response between two sets of harmonized guitars, or two pairs of harmonized guitars. So there's 4 lead guitars. 2 of them are going dueno, 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 and then the other 2 are offsetting that. So the full thing will sound like dueno, 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 dueno. That's essentially what's happening. Every other is another set of guitars. So here, take another listen to it and see if you can hear that. So yeah, it definitely sounds crazy and chaotic, but it's kind of one of those sections when you learn it and you hear it, not when you learn it necessarily, but once you become familiar with it, it doesn't quite have that chaotic element that I would have liked to have seen from it, right? Like you compare it to the intro, right? It's like they could have thrown some stuff like that in there to give it more chaos. This is a very minor critique, by the way. Like this is, I still think it's a really cool section, and I like it. But when you understand it in the context of the full song, it's like the only part where I'm like, that could have been a little bit crazier. But hey, it's all good. The drums and rhythms are doing relatively simple stuff. The drums are just kind of playing like a fast beat. And then the rhythms are going, I think they're just going like or something like that. Let me back it up just a little bit in here. Yeah, just which even that, it's like that could have been a little crazier, but that's okay because then this next section is definitely chaotic. Here, let's play it again. Right here. So yeah, that's definitely like nail in the coffin, right? Like that's the final new lyrics that we get, and it's walls are falling, churches burning, women ravaged, children crying. God, I can't talk. I can't. I've been talking for like 2 hours. But walls are falling, churches burning, women ravaged, children crying, flesh is tearing, some still fighting in this world of misery. So yeah, this is the end. Um, everything is going to shit basically. I wouldn't consider this the lyrical climax because the to me the climax is the peak of the story. This is more of the aftermath. But they are the final new lyrics that we get, and they describe the horrors of the apocalypse, right? Like women ravaged, flesh is tearing. It's very grim. It's not pleasant. But I think that he has enough imagery there to like explain what's happening. But I don't think that it's short enough and ambiguous enough to kind of let your mind fill in the blanks, right? Like it's not so explicit like demons are tearing off people's limbs. It's like you get to kind of decide what kind of apocalypse this is. Is it a demonic invasion? Is this God raining meteors down on Earth? Like, what do you think of this? Is this just humans destroying themselves? There's a lot of options here, so it's cool. Like it's a cool way to present it. Musically, it's basically just a modulated version of the verse. So I know that like it sounds like a whole different thing. Vocally, it's a whole different thing. It's a new thing, or a new melody. It's not the same melody as the verses, but on the guitar end, it's kind of just a modulated version of that riff. But they're just playing those higher notes a little bit faster. So, for example, in the verse, it's like in this riff, it's no wait, hold on, let me hear it. Let's get it right. That's it. Instead of so you see what I mean? It's essentially the same riff, just a little modulated to be faster and crazier, more chaotic. And it, I think the drums are playing the same thing too. Here. Actually, you know what? I didn't notice that. That's pretty cool. That's the same drum beat from the intro of the song. Except with snare this time. That's cool. That's really cool. I didn't put that together until just now. So yeah, very chaotic, very crazy, coming back to the crazy chaos. That's really, again, like I just love stuff like that where they didn't even let that intro drum beat go to waste. They brought that back in a place that is perfect, like or where it should be thematically. It's really cool. I'm geeking a little bit about that. I didn't notice that. I love the Rev. He's so good. Okay, cool. Let's see let me check the rest of my notes on this. Okay, the last note that I had for this, because really we've kind of reached the end of the song, honestly. I wanted to mention the very last line before the pre-chorus, which is some still fighting in this world of misery. Because even when I was younger, I always thought that was kind of a strange line to end on. Because you have like churches burning, women ravaged, children crying, flesh is tearing, and then like some still fighting in this world of misery. And it's like you could have replaced that with anything, right? Like you could have said like flesh is tearing in this world of misery, children crying in this world of misery. And compared to some of these other lines, like the line some still fighting doesn't quite seem as uh what you call it, evocative, so I was always like, why did he choose that as the final line? Because I know like M Shadows is super particular about his lyrics. um so when I thought about it a little bit, um I kind of realized like to me, when I think about it, it's like it implies one of two things. First is that these are the last people, like they're the idea, oh, some are still fighting. It's like there's just these remnants of people who are just still killing themselves, and eventually they're gonna die. So it's like this final line of like, all right, yeah, this is the last little bit of humanity dying off. But then the second interpretation, which I kind of like a little more, is that even after all of the chaos and the craziness and the destruction, we're still fighting each other, and we're still like at war with each other even after the apocalypse or during the apocalypse, right? Like we still are fighting each other. It's like nothing changed, right? And it's kind of interesting. With that said, I think in terms of the imagery, it still falls a little bit flat compared to the other lines, but it's an interesting line to leave off on, and it makes you think a little bit more than the other ones. So, yeah, that's it. I just wanted to make a note about that. It was something that even when I was younger, I was like, that doesn't seem quite as impactful as the other ones, but cool. So, yeah, then we come back into the pre chorus. And so, aside from some slight differences in the background vocals, which I'm just going to pass over, everything is exactly the same up to the end of the post chorus. I'm just going to go ahead and speed through it. Like, hold on to me for one last time. So, we come back to that post chorus little riff here, that ominous riff, but then we end with some chugs. And there we go. It's an abrupt end, just like humanity in the song. Kind of. I say that, but it was actually a very long-winded end because this song is 7 minutes long. Okay, so yeah, last little bit is like I think Avenged Sevenfold has gotten a lot better about using the third chorus of a song to benefit the theme, because usually a third chorus means that we've kind of come back to where we start. It can mean a few things. It can mean that we've come back to where we started, as in nothing changed, uh, or it can be recontextualized by the bridge to mean something different, like the same lyrics, but everything just means something a little bit different than before. Or lastly, it can be revamped with new music and lyrics to actually be something different and have a different meaning. Um, I don't know if that type of thought went into the third chorus here. Most of the songs on City of Evil have three choruses, so it's pretty. At this point in their career, it was pretty standard of them to do that. I mean, I say them. It's standard for everybody to do that. But even with that said, I do think having the third chorus fits here very well. Um, I'm glad that they had it. It implies a few things, which, like, first, humanity didn't change. We're right back where we started. But also, and this is maybe a little bit more pertinent, which is that the first chorus specifically, or like the first two choruses, were kind of like this. We're in the plot, and so the first one is like we're worried, we're sorrowful for our choices. I'm talking about mankind, right? We're sorrowful for the choices that we made. Um, and then the second chorus is like you guys deserve this, and it really acts as kind of more of a forewarning of your impending punishment, right? But then having this chorus at the end, it becomes more of a cautionary warning about what can happen now that the apocalypse is done. Like, the song's over, we're ending it, but these lyrics really take on a more cautionary tale, especially when he's talking about like lust and power, indulgence, no fear, left with his sins, how does this end? It's like, it's funny that they kept that question in there because we do know how it ends. Everything is destroyed, but it's still, that's what I mean. It's a little bit more cautionary rather than like being like a within the plot warning us of what's going to happen. Um, so the reason I'm bringing this up is because even though we have in this song like some really intense lore, story, setting, all of that, and it never gets broken, by the way. Like, I mentioned that before, but we never once hear about like cell phones or some shit, right? Like, it's all very much in line with like the setting and the environment that they created. There is still a message that the listener can take away from it, which is, lust and power, indulgence, no fear, left with his sins out, does this end? We won't be here tomorrow. Hold on to me for one last time. It's you know, be careful. Be careful with indulgence and hold your loved ones close, right? Because you never know. You never know when the end might come. So there's a few things that you could take from it. Again, it's not meant to be this super deep, sorrowful, tale. It's a crazy, epic, awesome story, right? But there's still a human element to it, and that has like relevance to your life that you can pull from it, even if it's small. And aside from that, it's a really great journey. It's really great fun. So yeah, overall, now that we're done, I've talked about this song a lot. To me, this song really is the definition of epic. It's a masterpiece in so many ways. There's so many awesome moments and songwriting tricks and things that are used. There's great cohesive themes musically and lyrically. It's an unbelievable display of skill. It really is just a top tier song. So you know, glad we went through it. If you made it this far, thank you. Genuinely, I appreciate you for sticking with me on this one because I love this song. I think there's a lot of people who probably love this song, but it just never really gets talked about. It's so deep in Avenged Sevenfold's discography at this point, and yet it's still so good for so many reasons. Um, so yeah, let's go through my little post song breakdown blurb, and then we can get out of here. So first off, the purpose of this song was to create a metal opera about the end of the world. This wasn't a single. This wasn't intended to be a single. This was them really just letting loose, and so this is just pure creativity. The genre or style, this is definitely hard rock or metal. I think those are really the only genres where you could write a song like this. You can't do something like this with rap or blues or jazz or country. It's got to be something like this. This level of technical proficiency and adventurous nature that there's you can only do this with rock and metal. Um, if somebody's got an 8 minute country song that does something like this, I'd love to hear it, but I have yet to. So, compositionally, sorry, song structure. It's funny in some ways. It's a little conventional. Like you have your verse, pre-chorus, chorus, your guitar solo, your bridge. Um, back around to a third verse or shortened third verse, and then back to your third chorus at the end of the song. But uh, really only from like the 30,000 foot view is it conventional because there's all these little sections, two post choruses, multiple bridges that go in and out, back and forth. Um, yeah, it really is a wacky song structure, even if it's like still follows that kind of verse, chorus, bridge, chorus at the highest level, right? Um, Compositionally, to me, this is a masterclass in composition. Uh, there's musical storytelling, extraordinary guitar work. The rhythms and drums are always on point, playing interesting, unique things that fit the section and fit what's happening. Melodies and the chord changes are perfect. The bridges are great. Um, Again, that whole orchestrated interlude is fantastic. Even down to the smaller guitar choices, like every little guitar line that comes in and out of the song it's brilliant and it's deliberate. It fits so well. The guitar solo is a monster. All of the vocal melodies sound great. They fit the sections perfectly. Cool harmonies. The harmonies are placed in places that are really great. Like when you have all those layers for the we won't be here tomorrow to emphasize like that's the voice of mankind. I think all of the vocal melodies are catchy and epic, and they do a great job of telling the story from this ambiguous narrator very well. Yeah, the compositional elements of this song are fantastic. They don't let anything go to waste. Everything comes back at some point, even sections that I didn't even know were going to come back, and so there's just so much here that is done so well in terms of actually writing the music. Um, so yeah, that's great. Mix wise, so City of Evil, I've always thought that City of Evil has one of the most unique mixes in all of music. It is like hyper dry. So if you don't know what I mean by like hyper dry or dry mix, uh, it means that there's not a lot of reverb, delay, or like chorusy effects that add space to the sound. Um, so if you want to hear something that's like a wet mix, go and listen to their self-titled album, Avenged Sevenfold's self-titled album, right? Go and listen to like Afterlife, and you'll hear like when you hear a song like Afterlife or Almost Easy, it's very full, it's huge, it's bassy. There's a lot of like boom in it, and then when you come back here, it's like dry as a desert, right? What's so funny though is that and they had to do that. They initially didn't want the mix to be like that, but the mixing guy. I think it was Andy Wallace, but it might not have been. But he actually told them, no, you have to have the mix like this in order to hear all of the elements of these songs that you've created, the orchestral elements, the drums, the guitar harmonies. uh the drums, what's so funny about having the mix this way is that it actually allows the drums to go nuts, and it doesn't like totally change the vibe of the song, right? So most songs, if the drummer were to just switch to blast beats, it completely changes the nature of the song. But in this album, the drums can go do all these crazy things, and it doesn't totally change everything about the song, but you could still hear it and it's still audible. Now you might think, well, that's not a good thing that the drums can make these changes and it doesn't totally switch up the song. But in this album's case, it actually works really well because of how unbelievably complicated the drum parts are. So yeah, but then even story wise, the mix works well because we're talking about a biblical apocalyptic setting. This is always something I found funny, and I just can't imagine it was deliberate because I know how they wanted the mix to be. But it's just one of those things where like the stars align, where every single song on this album has some type of like desert theme to it in some way, whether it's like Strength of the World being about cowboys or like Sidewinder being about a snake, right? Even songs like Backcountry clearly about fear and loathing in Las Vegas in the desert, or MIA, which is like being a soldier in the Middle East, right? It's like every single song on this album had this really dry desert theme to it, and then it just so happens that the perfect mix for this album that they went with also fits that dryness. It's bizarre, right? It's really kind of interesting, but it's funny because they I know they didn't like it, and they've actually changed the way, like the self-titled album was a response to that, because they wanted to totally switch up. They wanted that full bassy mix that they didn't get on this album. But then I'm like, honestly, I think the mix on this album is so much more interesting and unique than the mix on the White Album, as much as I love that album. So yeah, the mix here is bizarre. You're not going to find a lot of songs mixed like it, but it works perfectly for the scope of this song. Um, Lyrical content, they're poetic lyrics that describe the downfall of mankind. They describe the desperation of dealing with the apocalypse, or the impending apocalypse. We never deviate from the setting. There's no gimmicks or distractions. Everything meshes well with the musical instrument elements, and it describes the horror and sorrow of the apocalypse wonderfully. Imagine if they threw in here, I know we should be touring, but we're writing this song instead. It would be silly, right? So yeah, it's just, and I just think something like this is so much more like intellectually fulfilling compared to something that has those types of like meta gimmicks, like Damocles from Sleep Token. The theme is essentially the downfall of mankind as a result of our own sins. It is kind of an examination of like everything that we've done wrong, and our downfall, and it turns into a cautionary tale about overindulgence and sin. And I think that the final lyrics, hold on to me for one last time, it really embodies the consequence and the punishment that can come with um, us acting wicked, essentially. So yeah, final little blurb, artistic merit. Yeah, it's a dark epic song that embraces the hugeness of its subject matter. Everything works perfectly towards this goal of a chaotic rapture. Every section is deliberate and has a purpose. Every lyric provides more depth to the setting, world, or story. The guitars and drums add the type of intense extravagance that only a metal band can provide. A song like this is not possible in any other genre, and it's a great example of the potential that we have in hard rock and metal music, which, for whatever reason, seems to have been lost over the past 10 years, as we just keep simplifying and stupefying things. So yeah, to me, this is an honest 10 out of 10 song. It's timeless, and it's a must listen for anybody who cares at all for the art of songwriting. And there we go. We did it. We made it. I can't believe it. All right. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed this. I really did this song to juxtapose the last few episodes on Sleep Token and show that you can create great music that is immersive and has artistic integrity. Uh, you don't have to resort to gimmicks in your music. You don't have to resort to needless ambiguity, or religiously repeated mantras that are shallow and cheap. You can actually have poetic lyrics that are timeless and thoughtful. You can have, complex guitar parts that lend themselves to the themes and stories of your work of art. Um, yeah, I I I really love this song, and sometimes when I'm listening to stuff like Sleep Token, I just think back to this and I'm like, man, when can we get some stuff like this back? I think the closest we have right now is Polyphia, but I don't, you know, I don't even hear anything close to this coming from Polyphia in terms of the scope and the scale. So please, please, rock musicians, bring it back. Bring back some extravagance and some craziness and creativity and really like adventurousness. I think that's the big thing. When you listen to this album, that's the big takeaway is the how adventurous this album is and how they just went all out on every level. Maybe to a fault in their opinion, because I know they've reeled it in a little bit, but still, be creative, raise your standards, not just for the music you listen to, but for yourself, and the music you write and the art that you write and the things that you create. And when you find something great, like this, in my opinion, this is a great work of art. When you have something great, hold on to it and cherish it and respect it. So cool. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you made it to the end of this episode, which I mean, holy shit, good for you. You must really care. I appreciate it. And yeah, be sure to follow me on Spotify and YouTube.